It
But
seems,
how,
it seems,
but how does that compare legally to my original question to steroids in terms of severity of the law? So steroids, we all know, are Schedule 3 controlled substances. How do these other things, SARMs, prohormones, peptides, research chemicals, how do they line up against steroids?
so the answer is steroids are in the category of controlled substances. All these other things are not controlled substances. So they're not treated by the DEA. They're not prosecuted. DEA only handles controlled substances and growth hormone. So they're out of the picture. So it's the FDA that deals with it. And the FDA deals with it not based on what the substances are specifically. It doesn't matter whether it's a peptide or it's a SARM or it's a tamoxifen. If it's fraudulently sold, it's looked at as fraud. That's the key. That's the distinction that you're making between controlled substances and these FDA violations. In terms of what the punishments are, the maximum punishment typically for a steroid trafficking case by statute is 10 years, right? For introducing a misbranded drug into interstate commerce, it's 3 years, but it gets very complicated because the way it works, John, the federal government can come up with a million ways to screw you. And so you can charge, if you're a prosecutor, you can charge money laundering. And money laundering is such a broad term that it basically means I sold a SARM and I took that money and I put it in the bank, or I paid my car loan, or I paid my mortgage. That transaction becomes money laundering. That becomes a much higher potential sentence. Mail fraud. I put that SARM or that tamoxifen or that peptide in the mail. Bingo, I got mail fraud as a prosecutor, right? I can charge that. So there's a number of ways. Conspiracy. You and I agree to sell a peptide. Now we've got a conspiracy. So there's a million ways that they can escalate the potential punishments to make them almost on par with actual controlled substances, Schedule 3 controlled substances. Do they do that? In my experience, typically not. There's typically a lesser net result at the end of the process for somebody who's selling these FDA unapproved drugs than DEA controlled substances. And I think that's maybe Department of Justice looks at in the hierarchy of public harms, they look at controlled substances more seriously than non-controlled substances. And that, unfortunately for steroids, because they got lumped in, and we've talked about that a million times. And John, you wrote the foreword to my book, Legal Muscle, and thank you for that. But the idea is that once you put steroids into that category of narcotics and Schedule 3 and everything the Controlled Substance Act has in it, really linked it to a level of stigma, public stigma that exceeds things like tamoxifen or sildenafil or stuff like that.